Hi, my name's Rob, and I want to talk to you just a minute about prayer and what it means in my personal life. I think I really figured prayer out, at least started to figure it out, when I was about 16. I was taking part in a 3 week camping program up in the Colorado mountains. The whole idea was to combine survival with spirituality. And we were in the first week of the trip, and on this particular day, I was really miserable. I've been asking God to try to guide me in my thinking and to have a better attitude. But it was 30 degrees. We were at 11,000 feet. It was raining, and I was miserable. I couldn't see anything. I had my poncho on. I could barely feel anything in my fingers and my toes. And all of a sudden, I heard a cry for help. And I ran as fast as I could, trying not to fall on the loose rock around me. And there was a girl, one of the girls in our hiking group, and she had fallen. And she had a deep gash on her thigh, and she had a compound fracture in her ankle. The bone was actually sticking through the skin. Now, you can imagine we're a bunch of teenagers. None of the leaders was with us, and we just panicked. None of us knew what to do. Finally, we calmed down enough. We knew we had to get her out of the mountains. We had to get her some medical attention, but we didn't have a kit. The leader of our group, the leader of the whole program, had gone ahead to set up camp, and he had a medical kit. He had morphine, and he knew what to do. He would know how to help us. So we decided that somebody should go ahead and find him, and that somebody ended up being me. And so I left my pack there and I took off going as fast as I could. Now the ground was really slippery and I certainly didn't want to have happen to me what happened to her. So I moved as carefully as I could but knew I had to be fast. She was bleeding. I had to get to this camp. I started running as fast as I could. I went over rocks. I jumped over boulders. And I got to a spot where I thought I was getting closer, and all of a sudden I ran into a bunch of brush, a mountain brush. It was just over my head, and I could barely see anything. And I said, okay, I've just got to get through this. So I started hacking my way through the brush, was still trying to move as fast as I could. And it kind of started dawning on me that I might be a little bit turned around. I wasn't exactly sure which direction I was going anymore. It's easy to get lost in the mountains. And so I tried to get my bearings and I couldn't. And I figured if I just went straight ahead and moved as fast as I could, I would eventually get through the brush and then I could see where I was and I would find where our leader was and I could go and I could get the help. And so I kept going. I was going as fast as I could. And then all of a sudden, I heard a voice in my ear that said, stop. Now, the voice didn't say stop, like stop in a real small voice and hey, you should think about this. It was like a scream in my ear. In fact, it was so loud, I dug my heels in and I actually fell down on my tailbone and just slid across the rock that was underneath me. And when I kind of got my bearings, I looked up and I realized that my feet were sticking over a small crevice in front of me. And I thought it was a little ravine. And I pulled my feet back and I got up and I stood and I looked out over the ravine and I realized that I had slid just short of a canyon and the drop beneath me was over 300 feet. If I had gone 3 more steps, I would have plunged all the way to the bottom of that canyon. And I just went, whew, and I looked up and I thought, wow, that was something. But before I could even process that, I noticed that the rain had stopped and there was a little rainbow that had formed right in front of me. And as I looked at the rainbow, I kind of thought to myself, well, surely it can't be that simple. But sure enough, I followed that rainbow with my eyes and I watched it on into the distance. And as I followed it, I realized I was in a small clearing and I could see, and where that rainbow was pointing, just a couple of football fields ahead of me, maybe a little over a quarter mile. There was Stu, the leader I was looking for, setting up camp, and he was really close. And there was nothing between me and him, and I called out, I got his attention. He heard me, he came, he brought the medicine. We were able to help the girl. We got her down off the mountain. And in that experience, I learned pretty much everything I needed to know about prayer. And I'll tell you what I learned. I learned that before in my life, I'd spent all my time talking to God, telling God what I needed, telling God how things really were, telling God what He needed to know to really make my life work out. And I was doing all the talking. And I realized all of a sudden that God was there to talk to me as well, that God had many things to say, and I needed to listen, that prayer wasn't just about talking to God. More importantly, it was about communicating with God. And just like it is with your friends, you have conversations, you get to know them, you spend time with them. Prayer was something that I could do to get to know God. It wasn't so he could get to know me. That was kind of silly, right? He already knows everything he needs to know. But in talking to him and listening to his answers and hearing what he had to say, I could come to know God more completely. And then as I grew older and I practiced that conversation, I realized something else. That not only was prayer more than talking to God, was it that it was also communicating with God. That prayer is also ultimately about communing with God, becoming one with Him, learning to see through His eyes, learning to understand holiness, to be holy as He is holy, to see things the way He does, to live with compassion, to live with love, to live in peace, to regard everyone around me the way He regards them, to see everybody as whole, to watch the sick get better, to watch the wounded heal. And I realized that prayer was nothing more than being with God, being still, listening to His voice, gaining an understanding of who He is so that I could be more like that. I wish you all the blessings in the world in your life. And most of all, I hope that you come to know prayer as something that's a lot more than talking. It's a lot more than asking for something, although God is already here and He's always here to give us what we need. Prayer is simple. Prayer is something you don't have to learn a special language for. You don't have to learn anything new. No secret handshakes. Prayer is just about you opening up, listening, and wanting to be more like God.